What is up, mathletes? Thanks for tuning in. We are moving on to 6.4. We're going to talk today about simplifying expressions with rational exponents and converting as well. So we're going to cover two little topics here. Hopefully when you see this word rational, you're thinking of rational numbers or you're thinking of numbers that can be written as fractions. So I'm going to either use the words rational or fractional throughout this video. They mean the same thing. So basically, what we can do is every radical expression can be written and mean the same thing by using a fractional or a rational exponent instead of a radical sign. So for example, I labeled it here with variables, but if you have the square root of x or the third root of x, you can write that as x to the 1 over n. So if we look at that here, right, in example 1, the square root of 36, square root, remember, has an index of 2, so this is just going to become 36 to the 1/2. All right, my index here is 3, so this is going to become 64 to the 1/3. And then if you're seeing where the pattern is here, maybe you can pause the video and try example 3 yourself, right? My index here is 4, so this is going to become 16 to the 1/4. So whatever the index is, that's what's going to go in the bottom of your rational exponent or in the denominator. And what we can do now is, if we understand this, we can actually go in reverse. So we can be given the fractional or rational exponent, and then we can turn it into a radical expression, and we can actually simplify that, right? So we could take this, and we can turn this into, I'm going to take this 3, and I'm going to turn it into its index, right? So this becomes the third root of 216. So if you have your perfect cubes list memorized, you might know that the cube root of 216 is 6. If you didn't know that, you can just use that cheat sheet. I'll post that on Google Classroom for you again. All right, so that would be example 1. Now for example 2, we have 2 of them. There's 2 different ways we can do this. I'm going to hold off on the second way for now, but we're going to figure out how to do that in a couple videos down the road. So what I can do is this. Both of these have 2 as the denominator, so both of these are going to become square roots. Square root of 7 times the square root of 7. And what's great about this is you know how to multiply radical expressions. You just treat this as if it was 7 times 7, but whatever you get, you're going to put underneath the radical. So this becomes the square root of 49, right? 7 times 7 is 49, which just becomes 7. So those are 2 examples of how to go from rational exponent to then simplify. Keyword is simplify here, right? Simplifying it into just a number. So let's look down here at converting. So what's going to happen now is we may have something like this, where it's a to the m to the n. What's going to happen is that m to the n, all it means is that the m is going to become your exponent, and your n is going to become your index. And I'll talk more about that in a second, right? So what I have here is I have x to the 3 over 7. So I want to turn this exponential form into radical form, right? Exponential form into radical form. So what's my index? My index is going to be the one that's on the bottom. So that's going to be the 7, right? So this is the index. My index is 7. And then up at the top, this is my exponent. This is the index. All right, so my exponent is 3. So how does that look? How can we make this look? Well, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this 7 and we are going to put it as our index, right? And then what we can do is we can write this 2 ways. I'm going to show you both ways. We can write this as x to the 3rd. That 3 is going to become the exponent on the x, or we can write it like this. Either way, you won't be wrong. We can write this as the 7th root of x to the 3rd. So you're going to see it both ways. That's why I want to write it both ways. So again, whatever's on the bottom, that's your index. Whatever's on the top, that's your exponent. Remember, index goes inside that little triangle right there. I guess it's not really a full triangle, half triangle, whatever you want to call it. So let's take another look. Last example, 2 examples within example 2. So we have a to the 5th, right? So there's 2 ways you can attack this. You could look at this just as we have it. And what we could do is we could say, okay, what's my index? Well, it's a square root. So what number's in there? Well, a 2 is going to be in there, right? So my index is 2. What's my exponent? Do you see one? Right? I don't have one on the outside, right? It doesn't look like this one. There's no exponent, so I have a 1. And what I can do is I can turn this into, it's going to be exponent over index, so it becomes just like this. My rational exponent created is 1/2, so it becomes a to the 5th to the 1/2. And then all I have to do now is I just have to simplify this a little bit. So a to the 5th is the same thing as a to the 5th over 1. So what happens is this just becomes a to the 5 over 1 times 1 over 2, or a to the 5 over 2. And that's my answer, right? A to the 5 over 2. So that's one way you can look at it. If you do it that way, you are totally right. Another way you could do this, though, is if you wanted to just skip ahead almost, think about what's another way I could write the square root of a to the 5th. Well, let's take a look up above here. Notice how we wrote this in 2 different ways. We wrote it like this, and we wrote it like this. So what you're seeing is the way it's written right now is this first form. If I want to write it like the second form, it's going to become the square root of a to the 5th. So now these are the same thing. They equal the same thing. But now let's take a look. What's this index? It's still 2. But now what's my exponent? It's 5. So instead of creating a rational exponent of 1/2, it actually creates a rational exponent of 5 over 2. So this just becomes a to the 5 over 2. So either way you look at that, you're not wrong. All right, you're going to get the same answer either way you go. Just something to take a look at. So let's take a look at this last example here, right? So now what I have is I have this radical expression I want to turn into a rational exponent. All right, well, what's my index? It's clear here that the index is 5. What is my exponent? My exponent is 3. So this one is kind of written out like in this form that we just put it in. So this one's a little easier for us. Remember, it's exponent over index. That's my rational, the exponent that's created. So this just becomes b to the 3 over 5, and we have ourselves an answer. All right, so just make sure you understand what you're looking for. You're either asked to simplify, right, which is what we did here, simplify. You are going to be asked to convert from radical form to exponential form, or exponential form to radical form. So that's what we did in example 1 and 2. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this little math session that we had. Peace out.